seen before.
Christopher Froome à pied, c'est une image absolument inédite, incroyable.
They're pointing to his bike. He needs a bike.
Welcome into the ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Mavic, or Mavic. I'll call him Mavic from now on to spare everyone from my French, but it's the iconic French wheel maker, hub maker, and neutral service support that everyone sees. The iconic yellow on yellow on yellow on black. That is Mavic. So perhaps that's what they're best known for, right? Like the neutral service. You've got Jens Voigt cascading down a mountain in his all too small for him Mavic bike with toe clips and all, beat up from a crash, but there was the neutral service and he got the Mavic bike. And then, of course, you've got, and there's countless examples, but of course you've got Chris Froome with his iconic run up Mont Ventoux, had the neutral service behind him in a motorcycle, had a car in front, got a bike, couldn't clip in. Eventually, his team, his staff was able to get him one of their carbon Pinarellos and with the clips that he needed, and he was able to finish. But, of course, not before doing some running, which made for great pictures in the tour. And I'll post some here. If you're watching the video, I'll post some pictures of those rides and of those situations. So Mavic was actually founded in 1889 in Annecy, France. And like I said, it's perhaps best known for this neutral service, which more on that later. We'll talk more about that later. But first, we'll kind of do a little history of them, just a super quick run through. So in 1889, it was founded in Annecy, France. Here we go with a little bit of bad French. So Mavic is short for, I'm just going to manufacture, I can't even do it. Articles for bikes, basically. And then it's got the last two names, Edu A Chanel, which is the last two letters, the IC. Again, I'll post the verbiage if you're watching the video. But the acronym, of course, the result of that is MAVIC, or Mavic. So it was founded by Charles Edu and Lucien Chanel. That's the Edu A Chanel at the end of the Mavic name, of course. And that's according to their website. A lot of this sort of quick history is going to be according to the Mavic website. So their first logo, again, if you're watching, I'll post it, was a little different than the current one, but you can see the similarities. The yellow will reign throughout the logo. There's some yellow and red, and then it switches to yellow and black later on. But when it was founded sort of with the intent of manufacture and sale of spare parts for bikes. So basically a parts maker for bikes, which of course is what they are. In 1933, they introduced their flagship revolutionary product, a lighter mudguard, which was tested in total secrecy in the 1934 tour by Antonin Mange. It was tested in complete secrecy. It was actually painted a wood color. So that was 1934. Tested the light rim, and that light rim actually weighed 750 grams compared to the traditional 1.2 kilograms that the steel frame or the steel wheel cover weighed. In 1934, same year that they tested that, they actually brought to market the Dura aluminum tube rim, which was a two-part tube. And again, if you're listening, I'm going to post some of these pictures kind of throughout the episode. So if you're interested in seeing that, just come to the YouTube and watch it there. But this tube, it actually was patented by an Italian group or man a few days before. But they worked out an agreement where Mavic was allowed to sort of exploit and commercialize that Dura aluminum tube for many years. And as Mavic went on, obviously they focused on the wheel and the hub technology. That's where they really were at the forefront throughout cycling. And we'll just kind of run through some of those innovations in the wheel and spoke world. sort of a high-end product all the way up through, starting in the 30s, all the way up through basically current day. You've got, in 1975, they released the Hub 500. In 1983, the first mountain bike wheel. Greg LeMond, in the iconic 1989 Tour, wins on the Tout Le Mavic. Okay, that's horrible French, but again, just, you know what it says. It's like the Mavic group set. They introduced the helium wheel in 1996, and then, all the way up, I'll post a picture here. Here's Ulrich in the 2003 Tour in his, kind of iconic battle with Lance, and this is in a time trial. He's got the Mavic wheel set. So it was a big piece of cycling throughout history. But again, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps what has made it most iconic in the psyche of especially cycling fans, obviously riders and team managers and those selecting their products, or even recreational riders selecting their products, they know the products as well. But as a cycling fan, you know the yellow cars, the yellow motorbikes from the races. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that just in case you're not familiar, you don't understand what that means, neutral service. So neutral service in any race, in any, cycling race, you're going to have your riders, they're going to go up the road, etc. You've got and then behind that, you've got your team cars. So there might be one team car per team. There might be two, usually basically one team car per team. And of course, there's a group in front of the peloton. That's how the race starts. But then from there, it splinters off and you've got an unlimited number of groups. But usually, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So on the road, those riders are going to split out, split off, split up, etc. And depending on where they are in the race, depending on how critical of a moment it is, they could be in a situation, the riders, where they need something. They need a wheel. They have a flat tire, chain brake, something like that. Usually it's a flat, but it could be more. Break your bike, etc. Break a pedal. And there's no team car close by. And they're in the heat of the race. They need to get a bike. They need to get something to get them moving. Or they need a wheel. They need something to get them moving. That's where the Mavic neutral service comes in. So Mavic's got its cars, it's got its motorcycles, and they basically move around the tour, and they're not going to just help a specific team. So for instance, I mentioned earlier on, you've got Chris Froome. He goes down, his bike breaks. His team car has his bike, his specs, his size, his pedals on the top of their team car. Now, if that team car can't get to him, and in Chris Froome's case, there was a lot of spectators on the side of the road, and he was unable to get the bike from the car when he needed it. So there was Mavic with a bike that didn't have pedals that fit him, and he had to run up the hill. But in many cases, the bikes do work, or they have toe clips, like in the Jens Voigt case, where you can just jam your shoe in and you're good to go. But that's what it is, basically. It's the idea that you're out in a race, you're out in Paris-Roubaix, you crack a rim, and your team car's too far behind. You're going to lose 2 minutes waiting for your team car, but hey, here comes a Mavic motorcycle, and they help you out. So, they introduced this neutral service in 1973 in the Paris-Nice race, according to their website on the history stuff there. So that's a bit about the history, a bit about Mavic, a bit about where they sit in the tour. And again, if you're watching, I'm going to post some pictures about it to give you that feel if you're unfamiliar with some of those moments where Mavic is in the tour and is in the Paris-Nice and is in these races. I mean, it's part of the races. But so that's some of the history, and they're known for those wheel spoke hubs. They have a illustrious history, basically remaining at or in the front on those categories. But of course, over the years, it sort of changed, and they expanded into some different areas. So in 2005, it was actually Mavic was actually purchased by Amir Sports Corporation, which is a Finnish conglomerate. And it was actually, Amir was actually established in 1950 to basically sell Philip Morris cigarettes in Finland. So they were sort of set up to accept those rights or purchase those rights to exploit Philip Morris cigarettes. And I when I say exploit has kind of a negative connotation, but I guess in terms of business and rights, exploit just means you're able to sort of sell and gain the profit from sort of engaging with the world and selling those services. You can reap the profits. So it's sort of like you're professionalizing, you're exploiting those rights. Anyway, but so that Amir Sports Corporation was founded in 1950 to exploit the rights and the ability to sell Philip Morris cigarettes. And so in 2005, Amir purchased Mavic. It actually purchased Solomon, which when it purchased Solomon, some other things came over under that umbrella. Mavic, Arc'teryx, those being some of those things that came over with Amir's 2005 purchase of Solomon. So purchased Solomon in 2005. It gained Mavic. And in 2008, Mavic began offering clothes, and sort of there was sort of branching out a little bit from their core business, and it wasn't going great those last couple of years. Sales was sort of stagnated, and Amir actually purchased a wheel maker, Envy, ENVE, a wheel maker, another composite wheel maker, to try to bring them under one ownership and maybe sort of boost the cycling component of their large portfolio. But it didn't really work, and sales still kind of remained stagnant or declining. So in 2017, Mavic sales were actually 18% below where they were in 2015, according to those filings of Amir. And the rest of their businesses were doing relatively well, and yet their cycling component, which was a small component of their overall business, I believe they said it was something like 5% of their revenue came from their cycling businesses. But they weren't doing well with these cycling businesses. So by early 2019, they were actively seeking a buyer for Mavic. And then in July of 2019, Regent LP, which is a U.S.-based global private equity firm, completed the purchase of Mavic. And they didn't have much better luck. So then by early May of 2020, Mavic was put into receivership, basically a bankruptcy type reorganization, for this 130-plus-year-old company. According to BicycleRetailer.com, they discovered evidence that M Sports International LLC, a Delaware-based company, was actually believed to own Mavic, and that there was no financial connection between Regent and M Sports. But either way, it was put into receivership in May of 2020. It has 250 employees, and reportedly, so again, it was purchased in July of 2019, and then reportedly from February on into May, it was sort of an explicit management turnaround attempt, and then, of course, did not work in that sense and was not able to stave off receivership type reorganization. And then in mid-June, it was reported that, this is from Velo News, that the famed Bernard Hinault was part of a group trying to, purchase Mavic out of receivership, and Bernard Hinault, again, reportedly would be working with attorney Didier Poulemer and banker Ronan Lamole to initiate a French-led saving of Mavic. The Lyon Business Court stated that the deadline was Friday, June 11th for all proposals. Of course, and I think a lot of these times, depending on what proposals come in, that deadline could be extended, but that was the initial deadline. Again, as I mentioned, the deadline was actually moved to July 16th once it was found that there would need to be more time. And then Didier and Eno were going to present in July 10th to the court. And, kind of their pitch was, look, there's some other large, deep-pocketed companies coming in, but we put a face to it. Again, this is from a Velo News article. We are French. We have people involved here that, like the swimmer, like Manadou, the swimmer, who have a connection to Mavic and would like to save it. Of course, what are they offering? What are the terms, etc.? And the court and the courts in these cases, a lot of times it varies depending on the country, obviously, but they're usually tasked with, or basically it's dictated to them that they must take the best offer, or an offer that saves the most jobs, that kind of stuff. So it doesn't really matter who's involved to the courts necessarily. Now, and those people being involved might help boost their chances for funding, in making their bid, of course. But according to the courts, they really can't play favorites based on the people. They have to take a deal that saves the most jobs and gives the best offer to the debtors and that kind of stuff. Fox made a bid, but then pulled their bid. And again, at this point, it was reported that there were up to 13 different groups, and this happens. But again, that was reported by Velo News. And ultimately, the Eno group did not win the bid. Fox, of course, the component manufacturer known for their, shocks on dirt bikes and stuff, etc., they did not win. It was a French investment group, the Boulier Group, that won the bid. According to reports, again, and this kind of references what I said earlier, according to reports, 105 of the Mavic jobs would be saved, about half the current employees, and then they would plan to maintain the research and development facilities within Annecy, France. And as I mentioned, they had kind of gotten into some sports computers and apparel and shoes, and this Boulier Group mentions that they will refocus on the wheels, the hubs, where they are industry leading and best known. And again, after all this kind of happened, there were some reports that Regent had not invested heavily enough in the French facilities. Again, that's according to those at the French facility. Now, where it gets interesting for cycling fans is that in January of 2021, it was reported that Shimano would take over neutral service support at the Tour de France, and they have a previous relationship with the UCI, but again, that relationship would be expanded to also include neutral service. So we will be seeing Shimano as neutral service at the Tour de France. The Vuelta a España is apparently where they provide neutral service. Now, as fans of the Tour de France, the yellow of Mavic, at least for now, will be no more and will be replaced by Shimano. So that's just a little bit about it, a little bit about the history of Mavic, some pictures throughout the episode, scurry and the last minute ploy to have someone save Mavic. Of course, now they're saved. Their R&Ds in Annecy. They have 105 employees saved, and they're going to refocus on wheels and hubs, of which they are still industry leading. The 132-year-old company lives on, owned by the Boulier Group, French investment firm, and we will see how they do in the future and wish them luck. They're a huge part of cycling. And thank you for listening.